Hello and welcome to Sake Revolution. This is America's first sake podcast. I'm your host, John Puma from the Sake Notes, also the administrator over at the internet Sake Discord, the guy on the show who is not a sake samurai. I'm a resident sake nerd.
And I am your host, Timothy Sullivan. I am a sake samurai. I'm also a sake educator, and I'm also the founder of the Urban Sake website. And every week, John and I will be tasting and chatting about all things sake and doing our best to make it fun and easy to understand.
Fantastic. Now, Tim, I believe today we're starting a new series, another one of our deep dive series into the world of sake. What are we doing? What's new?
It's going to be wild. That's all I have to tell you.
Wild.
Yes.
Could this potentially be rice related?
Yes, this is our Wild Rice series. We're going to be profiling some rice varieties, and we're going to start with one of my very, very favorites. This, dare I say, could be an education corner / wild rice hybrid.
Ooh.
We haven't gone over to the education corner in a long time, so let's mosey on over.
We got to clean it up, vacuum a little bit. You got to pick it up. It's been a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to talk about Omachi.
Yes, Omachi. Have you heard of Omachi before?
I have had Omachi before. It is actually the first rice type that I heard of, if that makes sense.
So it was like the first rice strain that you got knowledge about.
Yeah. Basically, I had gotten a bottle of sake that said that it was Omachi on the back, and I didn't understand what that meant exactly. And I thought it was absolutely delicious. And I asked the server what this was all about, and she told us that it was the rice variety, the type of rice that's used. And this was the first time in my young sake exploring life that I had ever heard that there's specific rice varieties. I mean, obviously it made sense, but at the time I just never thought about it like that because I was very inexperienced in the ways of sake.
Yeah, well, that is a great first rice to discover. Omachi is really fantastic. And did you know that there are actually Omachi sake rice fans? And there's an Omachi sake rice annual competition, sake festival, every year in Tokyo.
All right. Well, I am, and you are, Omachi rice fans.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
But I did not know that there is a celebration and a contest. I would love to visit this. This sounds like a must-visit event for me now.
Yeah. Dare we say cult following? I think so.
Yeah. So what's the story with Omachi? Why is it special?
There is so much to unpack here. The first thing, the number one thing that you have to know, if you only take away one thing about Omachi from today's episode, it is Omachi is considered the grandfather of sake rice.
The grandfather.
The grandfather.
Okay. So it's OG.
Okay, strike that. Omachi is considered the OG.
No, original grandfather, right? No, isn't that what that means? No, it's not. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not young and hip.
The original grandfather. And the reason for that is that Omachi is not a hybrid or a cross-breeding variety. So it is an original, natural occurring variety of rice that they found in the mid-1800s. And it gets its name from the town of Omachi, which is in Okayama Prefecture.
Wait. So, the rice Omachi is called Omachi because it's from a place called Omachi. And then they discovered it. Like somebody was like, this rice is interesting. And we're like, oh, well, what should we call it? Well, we're in Omachi, so that's it. That's all.
Yep.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Imagine if it was like New York State, it would be like, oh, this rice is called Schenectady. Yes, it's Omachi
It's very
town.
anticlimactic, to be honest. I'm kind of disappointed.
Yeah. So Okayama Prefecture is the home base for Omachi. It was discovered there. And did you know that Omachi is actually, I call it the grandfather of sake rice because its lineage can be traced down to many varieties that are used today. Gohyaku Mangoku, we've talked about a lot, and Yamada Nishiki, the king of sake rice. Both of these major sake rice varieties trace their lineage back to Omachi. So they have Omachi DNA in them.
All right.
Really, really fascinating. So it's given us a lot of great characteristics, and we can talk more about what those characteristics are that you get with Omachi sake rice. For my money, I think that trying to guess which rice variety is used when you taste the sake blind is really hard.
It is very difficult.
But I think Omachi is one of the sake rices where it has a more distinct flavor. Would you agree with that?
There is a note in a sake that sometimes I'll notice, and I'm in my head, like, this is that Omachi note. I have a hard time describing exactly what it tastes like, but I could sometimes point it out of a lineup and just go, this tastes like Omachi. Yeah. And I don't detect it in all Omachi based sakes, but when it's there, it's really unmistakable.
Well, some of the words that people use to describe the Omachi flavor is earthy. There's a very distinct deep rice flavor that goes along with Omachi.
Yeah. There's also like a certain elusive richness to it. And it's one of those things, again, like when I have it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's that. But I feel like it's like trying to describe umami, which is a difficult thing for Americans to put into words.
Yeah. You know, as we mentioned, Omachi has not been crossbred or changed in any way. It's still the original rice strain, and it therefore retains some of its exotic characters, I think. And one of the reasons that there are Omachi superfans is because of that depth of flavor and that ricey little heart. You know, it is like describing
That
it's hard. I taught a sake class once, and it was for consumers, so these were not professionals, but I asked everybody in the room, I said, who can tell me what umami means? And this one lady raised her hand and she goes, oh, I know. Umami is what you say when something tastes good, but you don't know how to describe it.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that has always stuck with me. And maybe Omachi is something we say when sake tastes good, and it uses the Omachi rice.
Omachi is the umami of sake rices. Is that where we are?
Yeah, it does give umami to sake, of course, but it is a very hard to describe characteristic that it gives to sake, but it is delicious, right?
It is.
Yeah. Now there's a few other things that are important to know about Omachi. Another one is that the stalks grow taller than almost any other sake rice. Yeah. And this makes them hard to farm, hard to grow. They're prone to falling over in high winds, and they are not an easy sake rice strain to grow.
One time on a visit to a brewery, I got to go through a rice field and handle Omachi. And it was like a dream come true. It was like, you
got to manhandle Omachi?
And the stalks were alarmingly tall next to the other rices. Because it was literally across there was a path, and on the right side was Yamada Nishiki, on the left side was Omachi.
That's so cool.
And one of the things I learned on that tour was that due to Omachi being this wild rice, that it's really difficult for them to deal with.
Yeah, I've heard from farmers that it's harder to harvest as well. Yeah. The height of the stalk and things like that it's a little bit of a challenge, but it produces such a unique flavor that it's still worth farming. And there's big fans out there.
Is it still a popular sake rice today?
Yes, it's in the top 5.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
Yeah. Not top 5 rices produced, but top 5 premium sake rices. So by that we mean rices that are grown specifically just for sake making.
Right.
I think it ranks number 5.
Oh, that's nice. Is Yamada Nishiki still the king?
Still the king?
Still the king. Okay.
But Yamada Nishiki would not be here today if it wasn't for the OG, Omachi.
Excellent. So I've learned today that I need to make sure that I make my way to this Omachi competition in Tokyo one day. This is like a life goal now, Tim. You don't understand. Or maybe you do, actually.
This is a bucket list item.
Oh, definitely. This is something that must happen at some point. A live Sake Revolution episode from the annual Omachi sake competition. That's what I want to experience. That's really nice.
If we could combine that with a trip to Omachi City. Can you imagine drinking Omachi in Omachi?
Well, I guess the question is like, what's more fun? To go to an Omachi sake competition or to be able to say, well, I went to Omachi in search of Omachi?
I'm always scared of those sake events in Tokyo, the big ones. You've gone to some. I've gone to some.
They're great. I've a wonderful time at them.
But have you ever been chased around by a reporter or a camera?
No. I wish.
Oh.
That sounds like fun.
I've gone to several of these prefectural type of sake tastings, like, it's Nagano prefecture tasting in Tokyo. And they rent out like a hotel ballroom and there's all these brewers there. And I've gone to those events in Japan and I show up and I'm one of the few non-Japanese people there. And there's usually like local reporters who want to get the foreigner's point of view on this event. And they see me across the room and they start heading over. And then it's like, I try to run away from them and they start chasing me. And then they say, oh, do you speak Japanese? And I'm always like, no.
What? Where am I? I went to one in a ballroom once that was just like, it was just like a broader, like, all these different sake brewers are going to be there. And it was wild. There was a DJ and like an idol group that was like walking around talking to people. And the DJ was acting like a hype man. The idol girls would like go to different booths and start interviewing the Kuromotos and they would be broadcasting that throughout the room. And it was like, it got people really like into it. It was, you could see like people reacting really excitedly to that whole thing. It was a lot of fun. Sadly, no press though. So nobody followed me around.
Were there a lot of foreigners there or was it mostly Japanese
people? I think it was
people?
like Michelle and I were the only foreigners in the room.
Yeah.
It was a fun time.
I think that, a DJ and the Japanese idols and sake are kind of a dangerous combination. So I bet you, sounds like you would have had a lot of fun. All right. Well, I think it is time to put our umami omachi theories to the test.
Wonderful.
And get some omachi in our glass.
Fantastic.
So as we usually do, let's do a quick introduction to the sakes that we've both brought for today.
Right. Tim, what do you have?
I have a sake from Akita Prefecture. And it is the Azakura Omachi Junmai Ginjo. Goes without saying that the sake rice is omachi. The rice polishing ratio for this Junmai Ginjo is 50%. We got an SMV sake meter value of 0.
0. Wow.
Yeah.
So that would mean it has the same weight as water, right?
Yep, the same density as water.
Density.
Yeah. And the acidity is 1.8. And our alcohol is 16.5. Yeah. So, John, what did you bring today from the world of omachi?
I brought one of my go-to omachi sakes. So when I think of omachi, this is like one of the ones that pops into my head. It's the Kuroushi, which is the Black Bull, Junmai Ginjo. The brewery name is Nate Shuzoten, and it's over in Wakayama. The omachi is milled down to 50%. The alcohol percentage is 16.5. Sake meter value is 3.0, so a little bit on the drier side. And the acidity is 1.7, so it might present as even more dry.
There is a lot of overlap between our two sakes as far as the stats go.
Yeah.
And interestingly, neither of our omachi sakes come from the home of omachi. So we've picked sakes that use omachi rice and are not necessarily from Okayama. So I think it speaks to how popular this rice has become across all of Japan. So John, why don't you go first and get that in the glass, and let's see how the Kuroushi Black Bull Junmai Ginjo tastes for you.
So I've got this one poured, and right on the nose is that Omachi. It's just smelling this. I know it's Omachi. It's there's a riciness to the nose, earthiness that's there.
Borderline funky.
Borderline, a touch of like a sweetness on the, a ricey sweetness that's kind of coming out.
Yeah,
it's very, very difficult to describe, which always is the thing for me. It's like I love Omachi so much, but then I have such a hard time putting it into words. Very pleasant though, very nice light aroma. And then the taste. This, again, is a go-to for me when I think about Omachi, when I want to have an Omachi-based sake. And, very much the case here. It's nice and full-bodied. There is that richness that I was describing earlier. A little bit of a soft acidity, and it lingers. It doesn't linger too much. Doesn't overstay its welcome, but it lingers in a very welcoming way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's nice. It's there's a complexity here that's really enticing also. And just that soft, earthy, rich hint of sweetness. Wonderful. And one of my favorite things about Omachi based sake is that for the most part, they end up being very great to just sip, but also very food friendly. And I don't think those two things are always in opposition to one another, but sometimes a sake can really favor one or the other. And I really think in this case, this can be had by itself. This can pair wonderfully with television and the couch, and it can also pair well with heavier foods like beef. I wouldn't say necessarily spicy foods, but you can definitely. I want to have a steak with this. This is like a nice, like dry aged steak.
So I have a new hashtag for our t-shirts. Netflix and sake.
Netflix and sake. That's how I enjoy my sake, Tim. I've gone on enough, I think, and lavished how much I'm enjoying the sake enough. It's time to hear about the Azakura.
Yes. So again, this is our Azakura Omachi Junmai Ginjo from Akita. And I'm going to open this up. All right. So on the nose, I'm getting ricey notes and that same earthiness that we've been talking about all episode.
Yeah.
Another word that popped to my mind to describe Omachi sometimes is robust as well. It's not shy. It's not quiet. It's not retiring. It's more structured, robust, and it's bold but elegant. You know what I mean?
Very much so.
Yeah. So there's this riciness kind of wrapped in just a hint of fruitiness as well. So mine has a little bit of a back note of fruit, like a little bit of a strawberry aromatic going on, but it's really a back note.
That's nice.
Yeah. And yeah, I think either of our sakes, I've had the sake you're enjoying tonight, the Black Bull. I've had that before. And this one is in the similar vein of kind of putting the Omachi aromatic forward.
Yeah.
So I think either sake you were enjoying today would be a great starting point for any listener who wanted to experience what Omachi's all about. I think these are both really good examples of those.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So let's give it a taste. Yep. So what I'm experiencing, I would call depth of flavor.
Ooh.
Like there's layered richness going on here. And it's not that riciness that's all about grain and rice flavor. This is nuanced. It's riciness, depth of flavor. there's, again, just that back note of something very lightly fruity going on in the back that just creates such a balance and such a nice interplay of flavor. Really great.
So that's interesting. Yours seems to be presenting as more fruity. Mine's presenting as being a little subtly sweet. I think I've narrowed it down a little bit, and it's almost like honey. So it's almost like rice and honey. And it's like, ooh, it's so nice. And yeah, yours appears to be presenting a little bit more fruit forward, a little bit more like a berry or something like that. And that sounds, that sounds lovely.
Yeah, it is. But I mentioned at the beginning that my sake has an SMV of 0, and that has the same density of water. However, my impression, my feeling from drinking this is that it is richer. It has more viscosity than that.
Really? How's it feel on the mouth? Is it coating? Is it cloying? Is it just drifting away?
It's a little bit more on the rich side, and it feels like it's coating the tongue a little bit more, and it's coating the palate. It has that body, dare I say, robust. So it's got some weight to it. And the thing I like about this Omachi sake, this Azakura, is that it's not trying to push just the rice flavor in your face. It's providing complexity, and it's providing depth of flavor. And that makes for an interesting, thought-provoking sake experience. It's not a one-trick pony. It's not one thing. It's got more going on. And when you're sipping sake to study it, learn a little bit more, I think that's such a smart thing for brewers to do, is just to give that depth of flavor. It's really great. As we mentioned a moment ago, both of our sakes are not from Okayama, the home of Omachi. I think it makes sense if a brewer outside of Okayama is going to use Omachi, they're going to put it front and center. Don't you think?
Yeah, I do. I think that if you're borrowing some other prefecture's rice, then you might feel like you've got something to prove, and you might want to show that you can. I can showcase this rice. Look at this. In all honesty, I do love Omachi, but there are very few sakes from Okayama who have my favorite Omachi sakes. Does that make sense? A lot of my favorite Omachi sakes are from outside of there. It's just a matter of when I think of that note, that special quality of Omachi, I think it really comes through in a lot of these other breweries, all these other prefectures, and maybe it is they're trying to show off.
Or maybe it's just delicious and they want a piece of the Omachi action.
Well, they're welcome to it. There's a lot to go around. So, Tim, what about food? What's going on over there with that Hazakura?
You were talking about steak,
I was.
And I don't eat red meat that often in my private personal life, but I had some the other day, and it was so good.
Does it make you think perhaps of Omachi? No.
Yeah, I think that pairing would be really good. And oh yeah.
Yeah. Like, not even like no sauce or anything on the steak, just just a nice, let the steak speak for itself and let the Omachi speak for itself. The two are going to get along very nicely.
Yeah, the steak that I had that was so good was super soft cut of beef that was just drowning in butter. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking of.
Butter. Okay.
Yeah, butter. Yeah, and I had yakitori last night, and I think that would be a good match too. So I'm going more towards like the grilled, charcoal grilled meats, steak, chicken. These are sounding really good with the rice flavor and that robust edge that we get with the Omachi sakes.
So we're thinking grill. Like this sake, you want you want the food, you want fire touching the food.
I want smoke coming off of my food.
Okay. Let's just smoke, some fire, and then some Omachi, and then everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I would encourage any of our listeners who have not had Omachi specifically before, and I think you were very lucky, John, to discover Omachi very early in your sake drinking career.
It became like I'd go places and ask if they had anything with Omachi, and they'd be
cool.
like,
"That's so cool."
They'd be like, "Oh, you know so much about sake." I'm like, no, I don't. I know this one.
I know
thing.
one word.
But it was really a good way, an avenue for me to experience a lot of Omachi sake early on, and for me to understand the importance of rice in the sake. At the time, you don't know these things, but I think that's why we're doing this series, and this is just the first of many. We want to hit on all of the major sake rices, and then a few that maybe are a little off the beaten path, right, Tim?
Absolutely. There are about 100 registered varieties of sake rice.
Fantastic.
So we have
so many episodes.
At least 100 episodes to go. So any final thoughts on Omachi?
Well,
delicious.
It's delicious. It is difficult to describe. And there are a lot of really great sakes out there that use this rice. And there's a reason why, despite being the grandfather, the OG, that this is still in the top 5 rices that are used all over Japan to make sake. And even now, there's a rice grower in the United States that's making Omachi. So it's happening here. It's happening here.
That's a great point. Yeah. So it's lives up to the hype.
It is.
I would say that it lives up to the hype, worth seeking out, and a really unique and interesting rice flavor in your sake for sure.
Yeah. And the Omachi based sakes are atypical of my style of sake. Like my go-to style of sake is a very easy drinking, light, fruity. Omachi is rich, complex, ricey. It is not any of those things that on paper I look for in a sake. It's like I look for those things, but also Omachi, it complicates the formula slightly for me.
So when you go out to sake bars in the future, are you still going to use that line? Do you have anything with Omachi?
When I'm in Japan, I can read the kanji for Omachi. So I look for it. And I do occasionally order based on that. I do occasionally, if I see that, I'm like, well, gotta try the local Omachi for sure.
Yeah, I can't go wrong. Awesome. Well, I am really looking forward to future outings.
Yeah.
We can call ourselves the Omachi Hunters.
Hashtag Omachi Hunters. Hashtag Netflix and sake.
And when we take Sake Revolution on the road, we can find Omachi everywhere we go. I can't wait. This was really fun.
Yeah.
Yes, go Omachi, and stay tuned for future Wild Rice episodes coming soon.
Fantastic. That was a great time, Tim. So where can our friends on the internet find you, Tim?
Well, I am at Everything Urban Sake. So you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Urban Sake. And the website is urbansake.com.
Wonderful.
How about you, John? Where can people on the interwebs find you?
Most of my sake shenanigans on social media are the Sake Notes. That's the Sake Notes, not Sake Note. That's an app to track your sake drinking. And the more personal stuff day to day is John Puma NYC. The website for aforementioned sake shenanigans is also thesakenotes.com.
Awesome. Great. Well, I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in to our first Wild Rice episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you'd like to support our work here at Sake Revolution, one thing that would really help us out would be to take a couple of minutes and leave us a written review on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate it so much, and it's a great way for us to get the word out about our show.
Also, you should tell a friend. You should tell a friend, and you should subscribe, and you should get your friend to subscribe, and then that's 2 subscriptions, and then the podcast download to your devices every week without you having to do anything. You don't miss an episode. We don't have to remind you, so you don't miss an episode. Everybody's happy, and you have episodes to listen to.
On your device of choice.
On your device of choice.
And as always, to learn more about any of the topics or any of the sakes we talked about in today's episode, be sure to visit our website, sakerevolution.com, to check out our detailed show notes.
And if you have sake questions that you need answered, we want to hear from you. We want to know what rices we need to be sampling next. We want to know what we need to be pairing them with. What show on Netflix is going to go great with my next Omachi sake? Please reach out to us. The email address is feedback@sakerevolution.com. Until next time, please remember to keep drinking all that sake and
Kanpai!